Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning for all participants from Indonesia and good evening for Professor Markus Martenar. The Honorable Keynote Speaker, Professor Markus Martenar, the respected Dean of Faculty of Economics Sriwijaya University, Professor Muhammad Adam, the Honorable Lecturers of Faculty of Economics Sriwijaya University, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Public Lecture Series 3, 2022 held by Faculty of Economics Sriwijaya University, Palembang, Indonesia. I am Rahmanida, will be your Master of Ceremony on this today's event. On behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to extend my warm welcome to the speaker and also all participants for joining this public lecture entitled Inclusive Growth and Social Welfare, Reconciling the Micro and Macro Evidence. Before we get started, let us open this event by listening Indonesian national anthem and by seeking the blessing of the God with a prayer. To honor our country, please turn on your camera for listening the Indonesian national anthem, Indonesia Raya. Thank you. Now I call upon Mr. Ihsan Hamidi to grace the occasion with a prayer. Please and welcome Mr. Ihsan Hamidi.
Thanks, Mrs. Nida, for the opportunity. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Before we start this agenda, let's pray to our mighty God. For who's not a Muslim, please pray by your own faith. Please allow me to lead this prayer by Islamic ways. A'udzubillahi minasyaitonirrajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin, hamdan na'imin, hamdan syakirin, hamdan yuwaffi ni'amahu wa yukabihu mazidah. Ya Rabbana walakal hamdu kama yanbaghi li jalali wajhikal karim azim sultanik. Allahumma shalli ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala sayyidina Muhammad. Allahumma inna nas'aluka salamatan fid din wa afiatan fil jasad wa ziyadatan fil ilmi wa barakatan fil rizqi wa tabatan qablal maut rahmatan indal maut wa umratan ba'dal maut. Allahumma hawwin alaina fi syakaratil maut wa najata minan nari wal afwa indal hisab. Allahumma qul lana wa li walidayna warhamhuma kama rabbayana shighara wa li jamil mu'minina wal mu'minat wal muslimina wal muslimat al ahya'i minhum wal amwat innaka ala kulli syai'in qadir. Rabbana zalamna anfusana wa illam taghfir lana wa tarhamna lanakunanna minal khasirin. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina adzabannar. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun alal mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Taqabbalallahu minna wa minkum. Thanks. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Mr. Ihsan Hamidi. Now, we are going to listen the opening speech of Public Lecture Series 3, 2022 from the Dean of Faculty of Economics, Sriwijaya University. Please welcome Mr. Professor Muhammad Adam.
Thank you. The ceremony. The Honorable Prof. Marcus McTenna, Professor of Kennesaw State University. The honorable participant and guests of the International Public Lecture 2022. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asrofil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi washabihi ajmain. Amma ba'd. Greeting and respect for all participants outside the city of Palembang. Welcome to Palembang, South Sumatra, Indonesia. Welcome to the Faculty of Economics, Universitas Sriwijaya. First of all, praise the presence of God, the Almighty, for all the evidence of His grace and guidance, so that we can gather here for attending virtually the International Public Lecture 2022, entitled Inclusive Ground and Social Welfare, Reconciling the Micro and Macro Evidence. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf the Faculty of Economics, Universitas Sriwijaya, and the organizing committees, we are glad and pleased to welcome you, the International Public Lecture 2022, which is held by the Faculty of Economics, Universitas Sriwijaya. We would like to say thanks to the organizing committees, and also we would like to express our highest appreciation to our speaker today, Mr. Prof. Marcus McTenna, for giving his time to be our keynote speaker. Mr. Prof. Marcus McTenna, on this occasion also, we would like to convey the desire to cooperate. It is necessary for us to stir up the spirit of our university toward the world-class university era. In the future, maybe our Faculty of Economics Universitas Sriwijaya collaborate between your university, for instance, in the aspect of research, maybe student exchange, visiting professor, external examiner, capacity building of lecturer and education staff, joint research, and etc. Ladies and gentlemen, you know that this public lecture activity aims to provide information and knowledge about inclusive grounds and social welfare and implementation for economic development. Inclusive grounds can effectively reduce poverty if all parties contribute to create equal opportunities, to distribute the advantage of development, and to provide a wide range of participant opportunity in decision making, entirely based on respect for the values and principle of human rights, participatory, non-discriminatory, and accountability. I believe this event will be provide a valuable opportunity for our student, our researcher, and our government institution, as well as decision makers. Furthermore, this event or this seminar will be the source of the concept and breakthrough for inclusive growth to attain social welfare, especially for Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, you know, the seminar will not be well organized without the support of various parties and contribution from the participant. Therefore, I wanna express my gratitude. Now, I hereby declare that the International Public Lecturer is officially open. Finally, we hope the public lecturer to extend the knowledge and cooperation among all stakeholders to build a better economy. Thank you so much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Professor Muhammad Adam.
Welcome.
Before we come to our main agenda, let's get the photo sessions. Please turn on your camera. Okay, start from this moment. Screen 1. Screen 2. Screen 3. Thank you for all participants. Now we move on to our main agenda, the presentation from Professor Markus Martener. He is a professor of conflict management and economics, finance, and quantitative analysis, Kennesaw State University. The presentation will be hosted by Ms. Rasida Pertiwi, SAMSE. She is a lecturer from Faculty of Economics, Sriwijaya University. Before reading Ms. Rasida's CV, I would like to inform you, at the end of the discussions, we will choose the best participants that will get our vouchers. Now, I would like to read the brief of biography of Rasida Pertiwi. She is currently a lecturer under Department of Development Economics Sriwijaya University. She pursued her bachelor and master degree from Sriwijaya University. Before she got master degree, she had many experience in financial institutions. She was a microcredit analyst at Bank Mandiri, a credit account officer at Bank Rakyat Indonesia, and a commercial credit analyst at Bank Tabungan Negara. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our speaker, Professor Markus Martener and Rasida Pertiwi. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Nida, for the brief introductions. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. May peace be upon us today. Welcome to Public Lecture 3 entitled Inclusive Growth and Social Welfare, Reconciling the Micro and Macro Evidence, hosted by Economic Faculty, Sriwijaya University, South Sumatra, Indonesia. First of all, allow me to convey my warmest welcome to His Excellencies Professor Markus Martener, our keynote speaker, the Honorable the Dean of Economic Faculty, Professor Muhammad Adam. Good morning, Prof. The Honorable Vice, thank you, the Honorable the Vice of Dean of Economic Faculty, the Honorable Head of Economic Development Department, Management, and also Accounting Department. The last but not least, very warm welcome to all the participants and all the lecturers who has joined us through this Zooms and also YouTube platform. Before we get into our main sessions, I'd like to deliver several rules that must be obeyed by all the participants during this forum. Firstly, speaker will be presenting his lectures in 45 minutes, and please unmute your microphone and turn on your camera for all participants during these presentations. And we will open Q&A session in also 60 minutes. Everyone is welcome to ask Professor Marcus directly, or just raise your hands in the Zoom platform or comment in the chat box. Well, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I would like to invite our extraordinary speaker, Professor Marcus Martiner. We are so happy that you are able to join with us today, sir. But before that, I would like to read the bio of Professor Marcus Martiner. He is a professor of Economics International Conflict Management, Departments of Economics, Finance, and Quantitative Analysis, Kennesaw State University, USA, from 2018 until now. He accomplished his Doctors of Philosophy in Economics 1997 from Technical University of Ilmenau, Germany. He also achieved his Master's Science in Applied Economics 1999 from University of North Texas, Denton, USA. He also graduates his Master of Business Administrations in Economic Marketing Human Resources 1992 from University of Bayreuth, Germany. Hello, Professor Marcus. Guten Morgen, Indonesia times. Or Guten Abend in Germany times. Wie geht es Ihnen, sir?
Yeah, Selamat pagi. Thank you very much for this wonderful welcome.
Yes, thank you. Okay, let me invite Professor Marcus to deliver his presentation. The times is yours.
All right. Well, first of all, again, thank you so very much for this wonderful introduction. I'm very sure I'm not extraordinary, but I hope that you will enjoy my lecture. But before I start, can you all hear me well? And so we don't have any problems with the sound, okay? So let me share my screen. So can you see my screen right now?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, so you can see my screen. Very good. Thank you very much. All right, so the topic is inclusive growth and social welfare, reconciling the micro and macro evidence, which is obviously a big topic. And I was really wondering for a long time how to tackle that question. And although it is probably unusual to start with the conclusions, I think this time it would make some sense, because I believe one can only manage inclusive growth and equitable social development and social welfare if one is really aware of the nature of the human being and build an economic system on the supply side and on the demand side that is respecting that idea of the human nature. So that will be my main conclusion. So let me move to the outline. Okay, so there are essentially three perspectives on growth with equitable social development. And of course, they were somewhat historically motivated. It started out with laissez-faire capitalism, and then we had socialism, and then we had what we call now today the social market economy. And of course, there is Keynesian economics or model macroeconomics. But they are all somewhat detached from each other. And the objective of the presentation is to introduce a philosophy that is able to combine somewhat all three. And another point that I'm going to make is that there is only one political and economic philosophy that explicitly addresses the combination of micro and the macro perspective. And that is the social market economy, which is something that originated in Germany as a branch of economic philosophy. And whenever I mention that, I need to first emphasize that the social market economy is not a German model, just as Anglo-Saxon economics is not only for Anglo-Saxon countries, or the spirit of Panchasila is probably not limited to Indonesia either, but has some universal values. Well, and then second, I want to briefly describe what went wrong if we only look at laissez-faire capitalism, or if we only look at socialism, and what the social market economic lessons were. And then I will briefly wrap up with a conclusion about, what I think promotes inclusive growth and social welfare, and how the macro and micro perspective can be reconciled. Okay, so as I mentioned, there are basically three perspectives on growth with equitable social development. And let me begin with introducing them briefly. So there is obviously laissez-faire capitalism, which dominated pretty much the period from 1870 to 1917, maybe World War I. Then there was the experiment with socialism, which began in 1917 in Russia. And then after World War II, a new economic philosophy emerged, which is probably best described as the social market economy, although there might be other labels for it too. But anyhow, so all three political and economic philosophies that I want to talk about, they have one thing in common, which is that they actually wanted to combine equitable social development with economic growth and rising levels of prosperities. But, and that is my main point, is all three political and economic philosophies, they had a very different idea of the human being in mind. And again, I want to emphasize that it is very important to have a clear understanding of what the idea of the human being is, and which description of the human being actually fits the real people like you and me best. Okay, so this is just a little graph here that I sometimes use in order to illustrate main differences. So if we look at the individual human being, I think there are three main characteristics that are of importance to economic philosophies. Well, the first one is obviously self-interest. So individuals are motivated by incentives, and we want to become happy, and self-interest is the predominant motivator of economic action when we teach, for example, microeconomics. And closely related to self-interest is the idea of self-responsibility. we want to be the master of our own lives and rely as little as possible on other people. But as opposed to what we might teach maybe in microeconomics, which is largely driven by the concept of self-interest, well, we are also social animals and we have innate social impulses. And we definitely feel a sense of solidarity with our fellow citizens. And we don't like seeing other people living in misery or in poverty. So there are three dimensions that are somewhat important. And if we look at the differences between socialism and laissez-faire capitalism and the social market economy, all three philosophies emphasize those dimensions of self-interest, self-responsibility, and solidarity very differently. So if we look at socialism, for example, socialism emphasizes very little self-interest, but also very little self-responsibility. So the idea was often to say, you know, the state, the government takes care of the individual from womb to tomb. And if you go to laissez-faire capitalism, it is largely driven by the idea of self-interest and self-responsibility. And of course, we can see that very extremely in the United States, where there is a much greater reluctance to accept like social welfare systems as we know them from Europe. And people want to be largely self-responsible. And that is why everyone likes to carry their own gun. And they are primarily driven by self-interest as well. But when it comes to the social market economy, we actually explicitly emphasize that we need to look at the individual human being as one that is really driven by a strong desire of self-interest and also strong desire for self-responsibility. But there is also that element of solidarity that is really important. So now, if you just, you know, provide some evidence for that, I want to read some famous quotes. And so if you go to laissez-faire capitalism, I mean, I'm very sure you all know this quote. Adam Smith, who is generally considered to be the father of modern economics, he famously said that it is not from the benevolence of the butcher or the brewer or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. And that quote has been really overstretched in modern economics textbooks, because if you read everything that Adam Smith wrote, you know, he also talks a lot about solidarity and the role for the government. And of course, another important thing for him is that self-interest will ultimately promote growth, and particularly equitable growth. So he wrote that it is the great multiplication of the productions of all the different arts in consequence of the division of labor, which occasions in a well-governed society that universal opulence which extends itself to the lowest ranks of the people. So Adam Smith obviously envisioned that if you let people do whatever they can do the best, and they essentially participate in a division of labor and they compete with each other, that will lead to equitable social development and economic growth. But of course, Adam Smith could not foresee what happened in, let's say, fair capitalism in the 1870s, which ultimately gave rise to socialism. So what happened is that during the high days or the heydays of the Industrial Revolution, like in the 1830s and 40s, the working class impoverished a lot. I mean, even though, let's say, England, which was the leading industrializing country at the time, witnessed a lot of poverty in the urban areas like London and Manchester and Bristol and other cities. Not everyone, of course, was a loser. Many people were actually making, or many people actually were improving their lives, but many people fell behind and drifted into poverty. So, for example, if you were a construction worker, you had a good chance to improve your lives because construction workers were really scarce. But if you were a weaver and you were weaving loom with the hand, and then the machine loom came along, of course, that got rid of all the hand loom weavers, and many of them drifted into poverty. And that misery that we witnessed during the Industrial Revolution gave rise to socialism. And when socialism looked at the experience with the Industrial Revolution, socialists did not only look at historical facts, and in fact, many socialists misinterpreted historical facts and manipulated them for their own agenda, but they also envisioned a very different idea of the human being. So whereas in laissez-faire capitalism and socialism, the primary idea, whereas in laissez-faire capitalism, the primary idea was self-interest and self-responsibility, Karl Marx, for example, said, if man is shaped by his surroundings must be made human. If man is social by nature, he will develop his true nature only in society. And the power of his nature must be measured not by the power of separate individuals, but the power of the state or the power of society. So that is already showing that socialists expected a subordination of the individual to the common good. And Friedrich Engels, he was a good friend and mentor of Karl Marx. He even said that we need to educate our children to develop that new idea of a human being, something that we have later witnessed in China with the Cultural Revolution, where people were essentially been brainwashed. And Friedrich Engels said, education will enable young people quickly to familiarize themselves with the whole system of production and to pass from one branch of production to another in response to the needs of society of their own inclinations. I mean, if you read that today, it almost reads bizarre in the sense that, you know, how can one individual or how can all individuals of society always know everything? I mean, that is just a fantasy world that socialists envisioned. And more politically relevant, I think Che Guevara, I think it was one at the Bandung conferences, he said socialism cannot exist without a change in consciousness to a new fraternal attitude towards humanity, not only within the societies which are building or have built socialism, but also on a world scale toward all people suffering from imperialist oppression. So here the idea of the human being is that, each individual needs to subordinate itself to the common good. Okay, and on the next slide, we have a quote by Wilhelm Röpke, which is a famous German-speaking liberal economist, sometimes called a humane economist, who tried to combine explicitly the idea of the human being with the economic system. And this is a very beautiful quote here. So he wrote, "The market economy is not everything. It must find its place in a higher order of things, which is not ruled by supply and demand, free prices and competition. It must be firmly contained within an all-embracing order of society in which the imperfections and harshness of economic freedom are corrected by law, in which man is not denied conditions of life appropriate to his nature. Man can wholly fulfill his nature only by freely becoming part of a community and having a sense of solidarity with it. Otherwise, he leads a miserable existence, and he knows it." So to me, this is really a very nice description of the idea of the human being, because we can see all three elements: the idea of self-interest, the idea of self-responsibility, but also the need for solidarity, because if you just leave everything to the market, there is a great chance that some people just cannot compete for whatever reason, and they need help by the solidarity community. Okay, and again, you may have already sensed that I have some problems with Marx, because I find him very manipulative in his way he looked at economic history. So the whole idea of a class struggle between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, or the industrialists and the workers, is simply not true, I believe. So Marx, for example, portrayed the entrepreneur or the industrialist as someone that is innately driven to exploit workers. And that is simply not true. I think that even entrepreneurs have very noble values. And here on this slide, you actually see my most favorite entrepreneur of all times, which is Robert Bosch. You may know Robert Bosch from household appliances, but the Bosch company's main bread and butter is probably car electronics and like anti-block systems and other electronics used in cars. And so he was a German entrepreneur, and we happened to grow up in the same city. So he started his company in Stuttgart, which is where I grew up as a little boy as well. And he is very well respected until today. So if you walk through the city of Stuttgart, you will see the Robert Bosch Hospital, you will see the Robert Bosch Kindergarten, the Robert Bosch High School, the Robert Bosch Foundation is a relatively big philanthropy. And he, for example, he was very successful. And he once said, "I don't pay such high wages because I am so rich. I am so rich because I always paid such high wages." And at some other occasion, he also said, "I would rather lose money than trust." So this is an idea of a human being, an entrepreneur that really speaks for himself and his own success, which is completely detrimental to the perspective of Karl Marx, who never really employed anyone, who never run a business, but only talked about other people's business. So again, the idea of the human being is very important to be acknowledged as you build an inclusive economic system that can grow. On the next slide, I want to go a little bit deeper into different kinds of justice concepts that different philosophies emphasize. And those are different philosophies around the idea of the human being. So just to summarize again, you know, we said the idea of the human being in laissez-faire capitalism is self-interest, self-responsibility. The idea of the human being in socialism was largely solidarity, whereas in a social market economy, we emphasize all three. So very often when you talk to other people about justice, you know, people nowadays like to throw around the word of social justice. And it sounds good, you know, it always sounds right if you say, I want, you know, social justice. But social justice is a little bit of a complicated concept because there are different kinds of justice concepts that one needs to somewhat keep separated. So for one, there is the concept of equal opportunity justice. So equal opportunity justice simply means that we all have equal opportunity. I like to give an example later. I first go over the other concepts of justice. So equal opportunity justice means, you know, everyone has a fair shot at accomplishing a certain objective in life. Then the second concept is efficiency justice. Efficiency justice simply means that if someone is more productive or someone works harder or someone is just better, then they should also get a greater share of the pie if they contribute a greater share to the pie. And then there are like two kinds of redistributive justice concepts that are important. One is socialist redistributive justice. So socialist redistributive justice means no matter how much anyone contributes to the pie, everyone gets the same. So in the Soviet Union, whether you were a cosmonaut or a farmer, you got the same apartment, the same car, the same privileges. Market-based redistributive justice, on the other hand, means that as long as the distribution of income rests on equal opportunity, every income distribution is just. So I like to give this example of my brother and me. So I love my brother very dearly, and we are very good friends. But my brother, he is a doctor, and I am an economist. And it's probably safe to say that my brother is materialistically much better off than I am. He drives a fancier car than I do. He lives in a nicer house. But we had equal opportunities. So when I was a little boy, I went to the same school. We had the same parents. We even had the same teacher. But my brother had better grades. My brother studied medicine, became very successful, but we had equal opportunity. And so today, my brother will make much more income than I do, and that is perfectly fine because we had equal opportunity. So even if the distribution of income is not perfectly equal, as long as it is based on equal opportunity justice, we consider it market-based redistributive justice. Okay. So now let's take a look at how different philosophies look at different justice concepts. And each political economic philosophy, so let's say fair socialism and the social market economy, they essentially ask three questions. Is a certain justice concept, like equal opportunity, efficiency, or socialist redistributive justice, is this a natural right of the individual? And you see, if you look at laissez-faire, you know, little surprisingly, they say, yeah, equal opportunity justice, that's a natural right of the individual. Efficiency justice, you know, the first one shall get the gold medal, the second one the silver medal, and so on. That's a natural right of the individual. But socialist redistributive justice is not a natural right. The idea is if you want to have more from the pie, you have to contribute more to it. But market-based redistributive justice is a natural right of the individual. So socialisms, on the other hand, they also believe that equal opportunity justice is a natural right of the individual. Everyone had equal opportunity. Everyone could become theoretically a cosmonaut. But of course, it was equal opportunity within a great central plan. And socialists would deny the individual the right to efficiency justice because they favor socialist redistributive justice, meaning everyone shall get the same. So therefore, they also deny the individual of market-based redistributive justice. So you cannot have efficiency justice and socialist redistributive justice at the same time. And if you look at the social market economy, yeah, we also believe, and of course I say we because I identify as a social market economist, we also believe that equal opportunity justice is a natural right of the individual. We also believe that efficiency justice is a natural right. We reject the idea of socialist redistributive justice, and we believe in market-based redistributive justice. So if you compare the column natural right to the individual and natural right of the individual in the social market economy and laissez-faire, you don't see any difference. So where is actually the difference between a social market economy and laissez-faire capitalism? And the answer is, we have to look at the question whether the free market provides a certain efficiency concept naturally. And interestingly, libertarians and laissez-faire capitalists, they would actually think that the free market provides equal opportunity. But if you look at the social market economy, no, we don't believe that. And if we go back to that quote by Wilhelm Röpke, you know, it becomes clear that we don't believe that equal opportunity is a natural state of the free market. So that is really the only difference between a social market economy and laissez-faire capitalism, that social market economists do not believe that an unregulated, unfettered free market will provide equal opportunity. So now you may argue, why is it that people may believe that under laissez-faire, everyone has equal opportunity? So how could a little child with the same talent as a child from, let's say, a very rich family, so how can a child with the same talent, like a beautiful voice or so, from a rich family can have the same opportunities than a child from a poor family. So intuitively, we would say a child born into a poor family has less opportunity than a child born into a rich family. But if you really believe that markets are perfect, you would argue that a gifted child with a talent, that child will walk one day through down a street, and maybe it sings or it whistles, or it shows that it's good in math, and somebody will discover that talent. And then in laissez-faire capitalism, somebody will come along and say, I want to invest in that child. I give the child a loan. I provide it with money and good food, and it can go to a good school, and it will become a famous scientist or a famous opera singer, and then it can repay the loan. And for a social market economist, that is a little bit too far of a stretch what markets can accomplish. So we actually do not believe that it's realistic that if you are born into a slum, that you have the same opportunities as someone who is born into a very affluent neighborhood. And therefore, the government, the state, needs to exercise people's desire for solidarity, because nobody wants to see, or nobody wants to live in a society where there is extreme poverty. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So the idea of the human being and the various perspectives on different ideas of justice essentially call for a different role of the government. And in laissez-faire capitalism, we like to call it the night watchman state. So the ideal state is a night watchman state, which essentially means that the government has no other end but the preservation of property. And that is a quote by John Locke. So the idea is to say, all that the government needs to do is to protect private property of people, and then the market will take care of things. There is no need for, public schools or public health insurance programs or other welfare systems. And in socialism, the idea of the human being and the perspectives on various justice concepts calls for a central planner state. And that is a quote by Henri de Saint-Simon, who was a so-called utopian socialist. And he said, socialism means a conversion of political rule over man into an administration of things and a direction of processes of production. And that is to say, the abolition of the state. Well, it's turning the state into a factory in which you have a smart elite of planners that plan the lives of all the citizens from womb to tomb. And of course, to me, that really reads almost very Orwellian, like a quote from George Orwell's 1984 book. But anyhow, so what about the role of the state in a market economy, in a social market economy? And in a social market economy, we like to see the state as a referee. And this here is Ludwig Erhard. He was the second chancellor in Germany after World War II. He was also professor of economics. And he said, I believe that as the referee is not allowed to take part in the game, so the state must not participate. In a good game of football, it is to be noted that the game follows definite rules. These are decided in advance. What I am aiming with a market economy policy is to continue with the same illustration, to lay down the order and the rules of the game. So it is a more proactive government, but a government that is not directing economic affairs. Okay, so let's move on to quickly, because I think I'm running out of time. I have 10 more minutes, right? Did we start at 8? Yeah, I think I should be able in 10 minutes.
Minutes more?
Pardon?
Around 10 minutes more.
Okay, perfect. So what went wrong in, let's say, fair capitalism and socialism, and what were the social market economic lessons? Well, obviously, and I mentioned that earlier, the Industrial Revolution led to the impoverishment of the working class. And again, the socialists used those undeniable facts of an impoverishment of the working class, but they misinterpreted the causes, or they put their own spin on the causes. So what ultimately led to the Industrial Revolution and the impoverishment of the working class was not so much the brutal exploitation of the workers by ruthless entrepreneurs, but the fact that there was fast rural-urban migration. And if you look at the various bar charts here, you know, within 30 years, for example, if you look at London, within 91 years, I mean, the population grew from roughly 1 million to over 5 million. And what happened is that the influx of labor essentially increased the supply of labor. And whenever the supply of something increases, well, wages go down. And of course, they can go down under extreme shocks that people cannot make a living anymore. And they get so desperate that they say, look, I have to work and please hire me. And if I work, you can also, you know, my children will work for you as well. And of course, this is horrible. But it is not the result primarily of ruthless entrepreneurs, but it is an exogenous shock that needs to be accommodated through effective public policies like a ban on child labor or efficient labor laws. But just to say that the entrepreneur is a ruthless, evil creature, that is probably wrong. And yeah, this is pretty much what I said. And of course, so the era of, let's say, fair capitalism and the Industrial Revolution was simply not prepared for such an exogenous shock. And Adam Smith, when he wrote so favorably about the division of labor, couldn't anticipate exogenous shocks. And Marx's interpretation of the Industrial Revolution was simply wrong when he said the production of too many useful things results in too many useless people. That is clearly not a universal truth. Okay, so what went wrong in socialism? Well, believe it or not, socialism was actually pretty successful in the early days of development. I mean, look at Russia. Russia was an agrarian state with no industries whatsoever. Then the Bolshevist Revolution occurred in 1917. And, 30 years later, 28 years later, Russian tanks were victoriously entering Berlin, defeating the Nazis. So there was massive industrialization. And actually, many developing countries are quite successful in early days of development with very authoritarian regimes. I mean, we could see that in many East Asian countries, China has been very successful with basically a very centralized political regime, but of course it opened up markets and provided people with some liberties. But in early days of development, authoritarian regimes tend to do pretty well. When socialist central planner regimes get into trouble is when the economy becomes much more diversified. In early days of development, the main problems are really, providing good education, building roads and ports and railways and tracks. And so it's relatively easy. But as an economy becomes more diversified, the demand for public goods becomes more complicated, and it becomes ever more complicated for a central planner to identify what people really need. And that is when they tend to collapse, simply because economies become too complex. Okay, so what were the social market economic lessons? So social market economists agree with socialists that unfettered markets can create harmful social and environmental dynamics. But social market economists disagree with socialists that in order to have economic growth with inclusive social development, that the market system needs to be abandoned in its entirety. Instead, what markets need are certain institutions, rules, and policy principles that are in line with human beings' nature, that inhabit self-interest motives, self-responsibility desires, but also sense of social responsibility. So now if we look at the macro perspective, the social market economy, in my opinion, is really the only political and economic philosophy that starts with the idea of the human being, the idea of justice, an explicit role of the state, and then based on those fundamentals, it has developed specific principles. And those principles are not only economic principles, but those are principles that already start with the state and the organization of the state. So I will just briefly introduce themselves. So the state political principles are democracy and subsidiarity. And I have here some quotes by famous philosophers like here, Simon Bolivar, famous Venezuelan. He said, repeated elections are essential to the system of popular government because there is nothing so dangerous as to suffer power to be vested for a long time in one citizen. The people become accustomed to obeying him, and he becomes accustomed to commanding, hence the origin of usurpation and tyranny. So this is a quote by Simon Bolivar. So you probably all know that Venezuela is a Bolivarian republic. And I would like to read that quote to their president, Maduro, and ask him, what he thinks about it. Subsidiarity is another principle, which is basically saying whatever can be done by a smaller group shall not be done by a larger group. And subsidiarity has assumed a particular important role within Catholic social teachings. And that was especially at the time when the Catholic Church came under pressure from socialism, because scientific socialism promised to take care of people much more effectively than the Catholic Church could do. So the idea of subsidiarity was essentially a response by the Catholic Church to the rising threat of socialism. But there is little doubt that, we should organize the state such that whatever can be done by a smaller group shall not be done by a larger group. Then we have so-called state political principles. And that basically means that the government must be insulated from special interest groups. Special interest groups are the beginning of the end of most democracies. The more special interest groups can infiltrate a political system, the faster it will come to an end. And there's just another quote by Simon Bolivar again. I'll just skip that here. But there's another important principle, which we like to call the primacy of order over discretionary policy. What that means is government shall make rules, but the government shall not produce any goods. So the government shall not be a manufacturer of goods, but the government shall create rules that allow for equal opportunity and that allow for competition to unfold. And what that more specifically means is that the government shall avoid sector interventions, like subsidies or price controls. And it should also limit stabilization policy. I did not talk much about it because when I first read the title of the presentation from a micro and macro perspective, I didn't really think that you mean macroeconomics in a Keynesian sense, but the social market economist is rather anti-Keynesian for the following reason. Generally, we believe that if markets are well governed, if there are equal opportunity, and if competition prevails, economic shocks still may occur, but they will not occur in a way that will ultimately demand for extensive Keynesian stabilization policies. A third principle is that one should conduct social policy in a way that is market conform. That would mean basically cash transfers are more efficient than subsidies and price controls. And likewise, environmental policy, which is very important, should also be done largely by creating markets for, let's say, emissions. I just realized that I still have, I skipped a couple of slides here on my, I was looking at a different slide. I'm sorry, I spared you some slides. I have two screens here and I only saw one slide. But I hope you got the gist of what I wanted to say. I really apologize for having not clicked through my slides here. Okay, so what is my conclusion? So I have created a world map where I looked at different countries with respect to how well do they combine freedom with equitable development. And you see, the darker the country is, the darker orange it is, the more a country is successful in combining freedom with equitable development. And you see there's a certain regional pattern, like, Canada, for example, combines freedom with equitable development more effectively than the United States or Latin America. Indonesia is actually not doing too bad if you look at it. And of course, Indonesia is probably becoming a success story over the next 20, 30 years, I'm very sure. And also Europe is doing quite well. And we can also see that, if we run some empirical tests on it, but I don't want to spend too much time on that one either now. I just want to conclude. So what is the micro evidence for combining inclusive growth with social welfare? And that is that markets need to promote, or markets need to be the primary driver of inclusive growth. And what is the macro evidence? Well, the macro evidence is actually much bigger. So it includes the fact that markets are naturally missing, like externalities, environmental degradation. We don't have markets for there, or children living in poverty, or poor people not having to access. Those are examples of missing markets. And that clearly requires the government to create opportunities through public investments in social mobility. And the macro evidence suggests further that inclusive growth and social welfare is only possible if we consider an interdependent order of the political, the social, and the economic system. And that requires a democratic political constitution, which is based on subsidiarity. It requires a state political philosophy that is independent from special interest groups and that emphasizes rules over discretionary policies, a commitment to markets as the primary driver of inclusive growth, but also an acknowledgement that markets can be missing or be imperfect, and that government ultimately needs to act like an empowerer of citizens where markets don't provide citizens with market access capabilities. So I apologize for going a little bit over time, but thank you very much for your attention. And I apologize for having skipped a few slides at some point. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome, Professor Marcus. Now we're gonna go to quick Q&A sessions. For those participants who want to ask the question, you may raise your hands and also just put your comments in the chat box through YouTube or Zoom platforms. Okay, we have several questions now. Come from Febi Wanda. You may unmute your microphone.
All right. Is that my voice is clearly?
Yes, I can hear you, Febi.
All right. So thank you for the opportunity and good morning to my lecturer, Mr. Ihsan Hamidi, and the Honorable Professor Marcus Martana. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Febi Wanda Soraya from Faculty of Law, University of Sriwijaya. So from what I read from license player, he's reject government intervention in the community's economic activities. And what is the reason of his rejection? And what's your opinion about government intervention? Maybe that's all. Thank you so much.
I apologize, Febi, but there was so much echo in your question. Maybe you can, or if somebody could rephrase your question, please.
Maybe you can write down your question in the chat. Yeah, so many echo. I cannot see too. I cannot hear your question. Okay, we're going to the second question. Comes from Putri Oktaviani. Putri Oktaviani, you can unmute your microphone.
Okay. Hello, good evening, Professor. Okay, thank you for the opportunity. So I'm Putri Oktaviani, and I'm law student at Sriwijaya University. So I want to ask, do you believe in laissez-faire capitalism, or do you think that the government should regulate industries more heavily? That's all. Is it clearly my voice?
All right, Putri.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So there is a role. Now we have a big discussion about industrial policy, and for I'm a development economist, so for most developing economists, I believe that there is a strong role for governments to promote industrial policy, especially early stages of development. And in the literature, we basically know two different kinds of approaches. One is what we call the big push approach, or balanced growth, big push, and the other one is unbalanced growth. So I would argue that most people would argue that in early stages of development, people will not have access to finance in order to build, for example, a steel factory or maybe a railway track between two cities. So that is something where the government can, provide a public good. But whenever it does so, it should try to rely as much as possible on contributions from the private sector. But there may be some things that government would have to produce that cannot be done right away by the private sector simply because it is still so underdeveloped. But if a country becomes more developed, the lesser become the reasons to really conduct industrial policy, because the market should be able to take care of it. But the general rule is always the government can only interfere once there is a market failure. And then the devil lies in the details. Did that answer your question, Putri?
Is it clear enough, Putri?
Okay.
Yeah, maybe there's a
Okay,
trouble.
thank you, Professor.
Okay, thank you so much, Putri. Wow, it's very, we received several questions here. Maybe I will select, because of the limited times, I will select several people to ask. For Piawan Manulang, would you like to unmute your microphone?
Hello everyone, good morning. Good morning from Indonesia to Mr. Professor Marcus. First of all, I want to say thank you to you because you have given your time to become the speaker of this webinar. My name is Piawan Rasmolang. I'm from Faculty of Law, 2022 fresh students. My question is, we know that Indonesia is hold the G20 presidency in Bali. One of G20 aims is to achieve strong, sustainable, balanced, and inclusive global growth. My question is, first, should we as a student take up space and do an action to achieve that aims, and how we as a student give our role to achieve inclusive growth G20 mission? The second, how can it ensure that the growth in a country is inclusive? Thank you.
Oh, that is a great question, Piawan. Thank you so much. Well, first of all, I have to tell you that I'm extremely optimistic about the future development of Indonesia, also for inclusive growth. I know that from the Pancasila perspective, the fifth pillar with social justice, it is a big concern, and social harmony is a big concern. But there have been tremendous accomplishments already being achieved in Indonesia. So first of all, Indonesia has become a, maybe not a perfect, but a quite substantially successful democracy with a couple of peaceful handovers of power so far. If we look at poverty rates, they have been falling to, I think I read the other day, like a number that like only 4% of all the Indonesian people live below $2.30, which is like the extreme poverty line. And there are so many shifts now in East Asia, with China losing its luster as a foreign direct investor. Maybe there's a confrontation with the United States or Taiwan. So somebody will occupy the space. And I think Indonesia is in a very good position to occupy a lot of that space. So for one, I think Indonesia has an extremely well-run government. I mean, compared to all the neighbors in Southeast Asia, Indonesia is really the superstar in terms of democracy. Indonesia is like home to 20% of all the nickel resources, which will become a major component for, you know, the energy transition and electric vehicles. Indonesia has signed a tremendous deal with Japan and the United States to get rid of all its coal-powered energy plants. So we will see a lot of opportunities emerging. And if we just look at Jakarta, for example, it has become already such a dynamic hub for software developers and applications. So I think it is much more difficult to avoid inclusive growth over the next 20, 30 years than it is to actually accomplish it. I think Indonesia has everything that it needs. It has a well-run government. It is a solid democracy. It is a market economy that is increasingly opening up, and it has tremendous economic opportunities. So, and it's a beautiful country with obviously the best food in the world as well, which should attract foreign investors as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered your question, Piawan.
Thank
Is
you,
it
Prof.
enough, Piawan? Yes. Okay. Indonesia have a economic principle that is the Pancasila that you have mentioned before. Okay. Next, coming up from MBKM Unsri, siapa? Suryadi Haryudi. Okay.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I can introduce myself. My name is Haryudi. I'm from Jaya University, Faculty of Development Economics. And my question, Mr.
Sir, can you louder your voice?
Sorry?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. My question is, from a concept that exists from the past, and education becomes the standard for a country to progress, where the leaders have education and were experts in their field. Then what is the reason for this latest hire if there has been conflict from the past?
I'm so sorry.
Enough,
Pardon, sir, I can hear your voice. Would you like to write down your ask your question in the chat? Yeah, after this, I will read it your question. Okay, we're gonna move to another participant.
Maybe I still can answer Febi's question. She posted it earlier, so now I can read it. I don't want to.
Oh yeah.
So Febi wrote, from what I read about laissez-faire, he rejects government intervention in the community's economic activity. What is the reason for this rejection? Yes, that is actually subsidiarity. The idea is to say, whatever a smaller community can do more effectively, let it do the smaller community. There is no need for a larger community to tell a smaller community how they want to handle, you know, their affairs. So in other words, if let's say a smaller community wants to build a public park or a new soccer stadium, which is largely used by the smaller community, there is no reason to assume that this smaller community needs to ask permission from a central government. So that is exactly the principle of subsidiarity, what Febi was asking.
Okay, thank you, Professor Marcus. Next, we're gonna move to another participant, Mutiara Dewi. Would you like to turn on your microphone?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good morning from Indonesia to Prof. Marcus. Previously, let me introduce myself. My name is Mutiara Dewi from Development Economics. Permission to ask, let me ask about what are the main strategies for inclusive development in creating productive and profitable jobs. Thank you so much.
Could you repeat the last part? What are the main strategies for inclusive growth? And then I lost you.
Please repeat, Mutiara Dewi, the last part. Because of the connections.
I think she froze.
Yeah, there's something wrong with the connection, sir. Maybe.
If I can answer, the question began with what are the main strategies for inclusive growth? I think the first one is democracy and subsidiarity on the government level. Then the second one is to allow markets to function wherever they can function and have the government help citizens through access to education, healthcare, and finance wherever the markets don't reach them. I think those are, if I had to wrap it up in a few words, I would wrap it up like this.
Okay, that's the strategy to make the economics growth. Yes, sir. Okay, next we're gonna have the other participant to us, Mr. Fadlis FH.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. I have one question. There is, as we guys know that we have a recession on 2023. So what is the best planning to face the recession on 2023? Thank you.
You said 2023?
Yeah, the strategy maybe.
Okay, well, yeah, we will have I don't know if Indonesia will have a recession in 2023. I mean, obviously, it depends a lot on geopolitical events. I mean, we probably wouldn't have a recession today in Europe if a crazy lunatic like Putin would have decided to invade the Ukraine. Of course, the biggest threat to an economic downturn are of a geopolitical nature. So how to avoid that is more of a political question than of an economic question. But if, let's say, there is an economic downturn, which can always happen, it doesn't have to be a war, it can be another exogenous event. I think the lesson from history are always the same, that it is always good to save and to build effective social security systems. So if you compare, for example, Europe to the United States, you know, when COVID hit, Germany was much better prepared to keep people in employment, to have people keep their access to the health insurance than was the United States. So many, what, you know, sometimes it's called welfare system, like healthcare system, retirement system, social safety nets, they are sometimes called socialist, especially by my American friends who think that Europe is a socialist country. If you look closer at it, to me, welfare systems are actually competition enhancing and competition maintaining institutions that prevent an economy from falling apart if it is being hit by an exogenous shock. Because when the COVID hit the United States had to spend much more money on ameliorating the adverse effects from COVID because they never prepared for such an event. I don't know if that answers your question.
How for this, is it clear enough?
Yes, clear. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much, Fatlis. I appreciate it.
Okay. Next, we're gonna read the chat box from Suryadi Haryudi from Sriwijaya University, Faculty of Development Economics. The question is, from the concept that existed from the past on educations become the standard for a country to progress, where the leaders had educations and were expert in their fields. Then, what is the reason for this laissez-faire if there has been conflict from the past? That's the question.
Okay. Right. Yeah, I think that is a very important question. I mean, education is really essential. And okay, I don't know if this will show up anywhere online, but okay. So I, for example, believe that education shall be free. So I got my education for free in Germany. I got my high school degree for free. I got my PhD for free. And a lot of people think that this is socialism. And to me, this is not socialism because everyone had equal opportunity. So I was really not the best student, but I had to take exams with 700 other students and 60% failed. So now I teach in the US, and in case you post that anywhere, please cut out what I'm saying now. Everyone pays, but everyone graduates. And if we make it more difficult, you know, we get reprimanded by the dean that we get too many D's and F's, and then we make it easier. And then we have again more A's and B's. And professors get good student evaluations, and our students get good grades, but I'm not so sure whether they learn as much as they learn at the public university of Sriwijaya, which I learned is a very respected university. So I'm an advocate of free access to education, but please make education highly competitive and sieve out, as opposed to let everyone pay for education and then feel obliged to let everyone pass.
Okay, that's the answer from Professor Marcus. Maybe we hope that Indonesia next year gonna have a free fee to educations. So make all people, we're gonna have the right, the same equal, equal in the educations. Does it maybe Haryudi? Okay. Next, we're gonna move to another chat from Mutiara Dewi that have a trouble in connections. Mutiara Dewi from Development Economics. Let me ask about what are the main strategies for inclusive development in creating productive and profitable jobs? That's the question, the last statement.
Okay, I think I mentioned that earlier. So you really have to think from a, you know, various angles. I think having inclusive growth and innovation and a dynamic economy, ultimately you require a democracy, you require subsidiarity, you need to promote markets to allocate scarce resources wherever possible. And where markets fail, study it very carefully and make sure that people have access to good education, people have access to good health care, people have access to good social safety nets, and people have access to finance. I think if those 4 pillars is given particular attention, then, barely anything can go wrong, because people will ultimately become innovative themselves. And Friedrich August von Hayek, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics in '76, he said the market or competition is a discovery procedure. So make a society as susceptible to innovation by giving them all the freedoms that they have, that they need, and they will become innovative, and it will trickle down, I'm very sure. And those who do not succeed in the market, they need to be given special help from the solidarity community. So there is a role for the government.
So the market is the key to make the prosperity in our social. Is it right, Professor Marcus?
Well, it is one key. So the market shall be the primary driver of equitable development. But we know that markets can fail. So the government needs to step in. And a lot of market failures result from a corrupt government. Let's say government giving special exclusive import licenses or special privileges to certain groups. So it is really everything. We have to make sure democracy, subsidiarity, primarily market-driven economic development, but a commitment to correct market failures and have access to education, healthcare, finance, and social safety nets. I think those are all equally important.
Okay, thank you so much for the explanation, Professor Marcus. Next, we're gonna move to another participant from Jusniar Saputra, Faculty of Law.
Jusniar, you have to unmute yourself.
We cannot hear your voice.
Maybe Jusniar is unmuted or muted.
Maybe there's a trouble with your microphone. Okay, we next move to another participants. We still have 6 participants who raised the hands. We move to Inoy Abela.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. Good morning, Professor. My name is Abela Inoy from Faculty of Law, Sriwijaya University. Allow me to ask you a question, Professor. As we know, Friedrich Engels said that education is the idea of human being in socialism. What I want to ask to you is, what is your opinion on people who have a good education, but they use it in a bad thing, such as corrupt, which is, as we know, that corrupt is something very common in government, or they use it in bad ways, such as doing monopoly, full monopoly a market to destroy others' market. What is your point of view on that case? And do you have any advice for us if we have that power and that education? Thank you so much. Do you get my question, Professor?
I got your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So you raise a very good question. And so, Adam Smith, before he wrote The Wealth of Nations, he wrote another book that was called The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And the theory of moral sentiments was essentially an attack towards the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church held that we can have only a good society in which everyone uses their education in a good way if the Catholic Church supervises everything. So, well, what happened is that under 500 years of Catholic Church rule, there wasn't much development. The only one who developed were the church leaders who lived, a rather pleasant life, but the people lived in misery. So now Adam Smith came along and he said, you know what? Let's take all those Christian or universal values like modesty, humbleness, prudence, moderation, all those good things in a human being. How can we make sure that those good things in a human being really come out to the benefit of society? And Adam Smith already gave the answer in the theory of moral sentiment when he said, only in competition. So let's say you are a good person. You respect your workers, you treat them fairly, you are prudent, you are a smart investor, you work hard, and let's say I'm a slouch. I treat my workers like, I don't respect them. I sleep the entire day. I don't work hard. With whom do people want to work? Well, they all want to work for your company. So you will be just like Robert Bosch, because you probably pay your workers more than somebody else. Because if you treat them with respect and dignity, they will also support you in bad times. So competition is a moral enhancing institution. It is very difficult to get away with corruption in a very highly competitive society. It is very easy to get away with corruption in a highly monopolized economy. So that's why competition is not, like many people who maybe come from outside economics, they think competition is about survival of the fittest. This Charles Darwinian world. Competition is not survival of the fittest. Competition is actually the absorption of a lot of fit people. I don't know, Bella, did I explain your question?
Is it clear enough, Miss Inouye?
Oh,
Yes, thank you very much, Professor. My pleasure that you answer my question.
And I thank you very much. Sama-sama.
You're welcome. Okay, it's about corruptions. Yeah, maybe it's mental health in our country to make how to be good or increasing growth if our mental is still low. So maybe we should make our mentality far away from the corruptions. Maybe that's Professor Marcus. Okay, next we're gonna have another question from Ferry Kurniawan, FH Unsri.
Shall I read the question?
Okay, thank you, Professor, and thank you to moderator. Let me introduce myself. My name is Ferry Kurniawan, and I'm from Faculty of Law, Sriwijaya University. I'm sorry if my question is out of topic. Okay, many groups are excluded from development because of gender, ethnicity, age, sexual orientation, disability, or poverty. And development inequality is the effect of this exclusive development model. The great asset will always be owned by only a few people. I think this happens a lot in every country. And my questions, what do you think of the group in such a situation, and please provide a good solution of the problem.
Yeah, I mean, look, most economists, they look at social exclusion of whatever group with huge frustration, because most economists, we believe in freedom and we want to just live and let live. That is a little bit the mantra that you will find among many economists. And so you mentioned first gender. To me, gender discrepancies is one of the most frustrating things as an economist. I mean, I can tell, for example, when I just look at my grades when I give my students an exam, female students on average do better than male students. Female students, they hand in their homework more likely in time than male students. I get more emails from male students missing an exam and asking for a makeup exam. So, there's so much evidence that if you gave more economic power and opportunities to women, it just will promote economic development so much more favorably. But of course, it is difficult, let's say, in countries that are highly macho societies, maybe in Latin America or the Arab world, where male don't like to see women, move along or get ahead of males. But it is a huge tragedy. But, some countries have become quite successful in improving gender equality. And if you look at it, what really helps a lot for females to become empowered is manufacturing. Maybe services, but if you look at most countries where women have become very empowered, those were also countries that allowed women to leave rural areas, to work in an urban area, to, work in a manufacturing facility, learn a trade, and then advance. Then they had their own income. Then it was more easily to get divorced. They had to bear fewer children. Probably Indonesia is not becoming another manufacturing hub as China. It's probably more towards services, I could imagine. But if you have a massive service industry, there should be plenty of opportunities for women as well. Many programmers, I think it is very important to make it very attractive for female students to learn programming, develop software skills, data analytic skills. Those could provide many opportunities for females as well. So education is also the key. And of course, when it comes to discrimination against people with a certain sexual orientation or race, I mean, this is just a shame. I mean, there's barely any, policy that one can recommend. You can only hope that you have leaders, on top of the state that just, are good role models and live values of tolerance and don't promote intolerance, as we can see in many other countries, like, today in Qatar. It's very difficult, like various soccer teams are not allowed to wear a One Love captain band because it is considered to be a political statement when in fact it is just a social statement. So it is difficult. I mean, the gender question is more easily answered than questions about race. Systemic racism is a horrible thing. It's very difficult to get rid of. Discrimination against sexual orientation is a horrible thing, but it probably takes time and good leaders who are role models.
How's the answer, Professor? I'm sorry, Ferry Irawan. Is it clear enough? Unmute.
All right. Thanks for your answer, Professor.
Okay, thank you so much. We're gonna invite back Sir Jusniar Saputra to ask the question. Jusniar Saputra, is it already clear, your microphone?
Yes, ma'am. Okay, thank you. Good morning, sir. Introduce, my name is Jusniar Saputra from the Law Faculty of Sriwijaya University. In this good opportunity, I would like to ask, based on your presentation, in your opinion, in the current economic situation, which is not good, how the state regulates the economy to avoid high inflation in that country? Thank you for your explanation. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much, Jusnia. So it's not only high inflation. I mean, inflation is what we observe now is, cost push inflation as a result of the supply chain disruptions, as a result of the war the attack of Russia on Ukraine. So it is cost push inflation, but whatever inflation it is costly to society, and there is only one remedy, which is you have to fight inflation with raising interest rates. As bad as it is, there is no alternative to it. But that creates social cost. But inflation creates social cost too. I mean, if you are an elderly person and you saved $100 for your retirement and you have 20% inflation, that means within 1 year, you can only live off $80. So you have a responsibility to protect, those who saved their entire life to lose it within a couple of years. So cutting back inflation is important, but you have to raise interest rates. You have to make access to money more expensive, and that obviously kills economic activity and will drive up unemployment, which is another example why it is important to have or to be prepared for such an event with, certain welfare systems, what we call automatic stabilizers. If people lose their job, which can always happen, let them already be prepared for it and let them, then draw on their social safety entitlements in bad times. And once the recession is over, let's replenish it again. So what needs to be done is, and I would even argue that if a country has very effective social welfare systems, they are more effective in fighting inflation too. If a country doesn't have, effective social safety nets and they raise interest rates, they cannot afford to have a massive increase in unemployment because they will create a revolt against the government. So the government is more likely to tolerate high inflation, but that leads to impoverishment. So it's not only important to look at inflation alone, but also at the combination of inflation and effective social safety nets.
Okay, Jusniar, is it enough? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Professor Marcus, because of limited times, or maybe it's late enough in USA times, but we still have 4 participants to us. Is it, would you like to answer all, or we just select some of them?
I think that the question that I can see was from Inoy Abella. I think I answered that one. At least I tried to. There's another question. I'm scrolling up now.
In the Zooms, they are raised hand.
Oh yeah, you can go on. Don't worry, I'm not going to bed anytime soon.
Okay, so we will finish it until 5 participants. Okay, comes from CEO Antara Teguh.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to ask you a question, Professor Marcus and moderator. I want to ask you about socialism. If market institutionist rules and policy principles are in line with human nature, isn't that just Capitalism? I mean, from my perspective, human desires are the opposites of what socialism is. And my question is, I want to ask you personally, what is the best way to make socialism works perfectly with human nature without losing social aspect from it? And what is the example from it?
Thank you, Siwantara. Okay, I mean, I don't want to get too personal, but socialism cannot be reconciled with the idea of the human being. It never worked. China tried it during the Cultural Revolution, and it starved, I don't know, 5 million people into death. Stalin tried to do it in Russia. I mean, socialism is, at least in the historical sense, the way we saw it, is a highly totalitarian regime that just is so contradictory to the idea of the human being that I don't know how to describe it in the strongest possible terms. So I don't think that, I mean, if you define socialism as collective planning and collective ownership of property, that will never work. The idea is for equitable, inclusive development is, and that is what I firmly believe, is the idea of the human being. People want to be self-responsible. They want to pursue their self-interest. And once they pursue their self-interest, they will actually be taking care of other people who need help. And then solidarity kicks in. So there is also an order to it. I think people need to first be satisfied with being self-responsible, being allowed to pursue their self-interest. And then thirdly, I trust every individual to help somebody in need. That is what I believe. But I never will believe a government telling me what I'm supposed to do.
How, CEO? Is it clear?
Thank you for your perspective. I really respect it. Thank you, Prof.
Sama-sama, Siwantara.
Okay. Now we still have 4 rest participants. I invite Afifa Salsabila.
Thank you for the opportunity and this session. Good morning, Professor. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Afifa Salsabila. I am from the Faculty of Law, Sriwijaya University. Previously, I have read slides about the nature of human being and the role of the state, and also I have read Henry Saint-Simon statement. Socialism means a conversion of political rule over man into an administration of things and a direction of process of production. That is to say, the abolition of the state. Can I know what is abolition state in the statement? Thank you, Professor.
Oh, the abolishment of the state is no more political decision-making processes, only the direction of economic affairs. People will become so indoctrinated with the plan and will adopt it so happily that there are no political decisions necessary anymore. Those were utopian socialists, right? I mean, there are 2 kinds of socialism. There's the utopian socialists, which are essentially dreamers about the idea of the human being. And there's the scientific socialists like Karl Marx. Karl Marx was a scientific socialist, reasoning based on a dialectic like a thesis, capital exploits labor, an antithesis, labor revolts against capital, and then the synthesis, which is socialism. That was scientific socialism. Henri Saint-Simon, he was an utopian socialist, meaning that he envisioned a state which is, as the first part said, only consisting of the direction of, what people want to do, and people are happy with it. People don't articulate anymore a will towards the state. They are just recipients of commands.
It's already answered by Professor Marcus Afifa. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Next, coming up from Junifer Tamim. Please unmute your microphone.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. Good morning from Indonesian, Prof. My name is Junifer Tamin from Economic Development, Faculty of Economic Development. I have one question. In supporting Indonesian economic growth and the welfare of the Indonesian people, our government carry out international trade so they can many investors can enter to Indonesia. But what is the right solution so that our country doesn't depend on the other country in importing goods and there is no excessive exploitation from the other country to Indonesia? Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Jennifer. So I somehow sense from your question that you are a mercantilist a little bit. So you think exports or imports are bad and trade is bad. Did I understand that right?
Yeah, mercantilism.
So I somehow feel you associate trade with exploitation and basically a zero-sum game, right? Yeah, but you see, I don't know, there's a beautiful economic theory that shows that countries grow rich by trading with each other and specializing in what they can do the best. And that is the famous theory of comparative advantage. I mean, look at the countries who don't trade. Look at North Korea. Well, they don't trade. Well, then they never get rich. So the ability to compete internationally and to exchange goods for other goods that you consider to be more favorable, how can that be wrong? So that is a blessing. So there should be more trade and trade restrictions, and a retreat from globalization is something that, many economists look at with, great concern these days. I mean, there's always the interwovenness between politics and economics, but there will be a lot of transformation over the next couple of years. Probably China may lose its predominant role in trade, and that may go to other countries like Vietnam and maybe hopefully Indonesia. But there are also opportunities for it, and and countries can benefit tremendously from trade. I mean, just imagine Indonesia, which I mentioned earlier, is a major player for nickel. And, and I think Jokowi is right if he says, look, if you want to invest in electric vehicles, Indonesia is the right place. And, and then use the domestic resources of nickel to produce batteries or electric vehicles. And then you have manufacturing and maybe electric scooters, electric cars, electric buses, electric lorries, electric trains. That can spur a lot of development. Yeah, by bringing in, foreign expertise and then grow with foreign direct investment.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Junifer, for the questions. Next, we're gonna read the questions from. Would you like to make it up, Febri? Okay, from Samudra. Good morning from Indonesia and good evening, Professor Marcus. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Samudra Bramantio, Faculty of Law. The question is, if all the people in this world have the same equal chance on getting job, then why there is still a lot of unemployment? Isn't this mean that the concept of equal itself doesn't really work as you said before? That the poor have the same chance as the rich, but the harsh reality itself that is not true, especially in some countries. So how we really going to remove the differences so that we can make a better welfare for the people?
Hold on, let me read that again. I'm not so sure whether you can actually say that this is really true. So I don't think in countries that have a lot of equal opportunity, I think they have really much less unemployment than countries with very few equal opportunities. So if you look, for example, at countries that are highly corrupt and heavily rely maybe on natural resources, you may have very unequal opportunities, and you have a high percentage of vulnerable employment, and you typically have a huge informal sector without any access to social safety nets. So I would find it difficult to if let's say, if I look at data, which I like to do a lot, and I would look at countries that have a very low indicator of income inequality, you may have heard of the Gini coefficient. If I would download data about countries' level of inequality, and I would regress it against the rate of unemployment, I'm almost certain that countries that have a higher inequality on the x-axis, they have more unemployment. I'm very sure we will get a scatter plot that's upward sloping. But there will be always some natural unemployment. I mean, there's the concept of natural unemployment, which is basically frictional stuff, but I think equal opportunity is an employment creator and an unemployment reducer.
Is it enough, Samudra, for the answer?
You
Yes,
have to
thank you, sir.
You take a look at the data, try to download data of the Gini coefficient and unemployment rates or vulnerable employment. I'm very sure you will get the positive relationship.
Okay. Okay. Because of limited times, I think I just choose one more participants to answer. From Zoom, Sir Rifki Murdani.
Okay, thank you for the moderators. Can you hear my sound?
Perfect, Rifki.
Okay. My question is, as we know, one of the most popular sport fair called FIFA Cup is already held in Qatar. There's rumor said that the host party do human abuse to earn money for its country in order to hold the FIFA World Cup.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Rifki. There's some noise. Would you like to write on your question?
Okay, I will write down the
Yeah. Turn off your microphone. Next, we're gonna move to the last participants. We have Actually, there's no more participant us in the Zoom. So we move to another participant in the chat box. From Mickey Julian Shah. The question from low faculty, my question is what went wrong in laissez-faire capitalisms and socialisms, and what were the social market economics lesson? Actually, it is have explained by Professor Marcos. Is it right? You want to explain more?
Yeah, I think I skipped the slides. That was my mistake. I had like 2 screens here, but so I'm thankful for you asking that question again. I mean, first of all, as a social market economist, we definitely sympathize with socialist desire for equitable development. But the lesson was that, you know, socialism simply doesn't promote economic development. You know, maybe we get everyone equal, but we get everyone only equal by making everyone equally poor. So there was no growth. So the lesson from laissez-faire period, or the period of industrial revolution, that was that there is a lot of growth potential. I mean, there is no doubt that since 1870, the world economy took off, but there was a lot of inequality, and there was a lot of hardship, and there were many exogenous shocks like fast rural-urban migration that we couldn't really accommodate. So the lesson for social market economists was that if you want to have growth, you have to have markets as much as possible. But you have to acknowledge, as opposed to the laissez-faire capitalists or libertarians, that markets do have limitations. And some markets are simply missing because there is no market for a poor person living in a slum to go to a good school. That market is simply not there. So there is nothing wrong with the government providing, you know, schools or handing out vouchers so that those disenfranchised or disadvantaged children can, you know, at least, you know, get good schooling as well. And that should promote social mobility.
Okay, that's the answer from Professor Marcus about what went wrong in laissez-faire capitalism, socialism, and social market economics. Okay, this is the end of Q&A session. Professor Marcus, actually, we have many participants in Q&A session. Thank you so much. Indicate that you all have enthusiasm high. Okay. Next, I would like to.
I may say just a big thank you to all of you. I really want to thank University Sriwijaya for that opportunity, Dean Mohammed Adam, also my dear colleague, Professor Sri, for giving me this opportunity. And also you did a wonderful job in moderating this session. And I was really impressed by the students and the eagerness, you know, to learn. I mean, I don't think I have ever given a Zoom conference with 455 participants. So I'm extremely humbled, and I feel extremely honored by this opportunity. And I really hope that I could have met your expectations. So really thank you so very much for this opportunity.
Yeah, you're welcome, Professor Marcus. Okay, before I close this sessions, I would like to conclude that there are several ideas of human being based on the laissez-faire capitalism, socialism, and social market economy that are self-interest, self-responsibility, and also solidarity. And also from the micro evidence, markets needs to be primary driver of inclusive growth, and from the macro evidence, market still requires government to create market opportunities through investment in social mobility. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, finally, we come to the end part of our presentations. We would like to say thanks to our amazing speaker for the informative and interesting talk. Thank you so much. Hope we can still meet in another occasions, Prof. And thank you so much for all the participants who joined and follow this event from the beginning to the end. I appreciate the enthusiastic to attend.
Okay. Sorry for the inconvenience. Okay. Thank you for Professor Markus for the insightful knowledge, and also Miss Resida as a moderator for hosting that sessions. Before we move on to the closing, please give me some minutes to announce the winners. To all of the participants that the names are mentioned, please raise your hand. The first one is Piawai Manualang. And the next is Sio Antara. And then Putri Oktaviani, Junifer Tamim, and Mutiara Dewi. Congratulations for all the winners. Please contact Mr. De Febri for the further information. His phone number is on the chat box. Thank you so much for all the participants. It is very honored to have all of you here. On behalf of the committee today, I would like to apologize for any inconvenience during this today's event. Hopefully, this event will give many advantage and expand our knowledge. I am Rahmanida signing out and see you in the next other event. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. For the Prof. Markus, this agenda is over. If you want to leave, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Markus.
Thank you so very much. I really appreciate your hospitality. Your university left a very great impression on me. Again,
Hope we can still contact each other, Professor Marcus, in the next occasion.
Right.
Thank you so much.
So until then, please.
Belum.